Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Bear League Project, how the heck are you? It's a fantastic day today out here in Southern Colorado, reporting to you live in the Mobile Command Center in a van down by the river, literally. And today's guest is Mr. John DeSouza, X-Man, a retired FBI agent of over 20 years in the field experience. I've known John now for, I think 5 or 6 years. We've had some great video presentations in the past that are still available on the website, leakproject.com. Just check us out in the archives. John, how the heck are you, man?
I am great, Rex. Thanks so much for having me on here with you and your wonderful audience.
Yeah, this C60 from shopc60.com is awesome. Thank you, Ken and friends over at shopc60.com, and thank you for giving our League Project friends a 10% discount by using the code LEAK10 and clicking this link specific. Have you heard of Carbon 60? Well, if you haven't, let me tell you what it is. Carbon 60 is one of the most powerful antioxidants on the planet. Nobel Prize-winning antioxidant that works at the cellular level to lift the oxidative burden. C60 neutralizes toxic free radicals and helps to support the mitochondrial function. It also helps fight inflammation. It helps support a healthy immune system, and it boosts energy levels like you wouldn't believe. Oh yeah, what do you think of my dance moves? So go right now to shopc60.com, click the link specific, and or use the code LEAK10 for a 10% discount.
It's fantastic to be back here, and you guys are so knowledgeable. You're so connected. I am so happy to be here. I love watching you work in these areas of the paranormal consciousness, all these crazy topics that you get into, and it's just so important, so good. I'm just so glad to be here. Thanks again, Rex, for having me.
Oh, thank you, man. Geez, it's a real honor, seriously. And you know, we did an interview, I think like 8 years ago, 7-8 years ago, and that video went blockbuster. It got over 1 million views, and we talked about some very deep subjects that now, I don't know, I think of it this way. Freedom used to cost, the freedom of speech used to be a lot more affordable. Let's just leave it at that, right? We live in a day of Nostradamus, where we all could be like Nostradamus in a sense, and very prophetic and metaphoric.
I wanted to start off actually on what you just said, just as a matter of good luck, because it's the same way I started that blockbuster interview that we did a couple of years ago, and I wanted to revisit that as well. And it's because we are in a time where all the 3-letter agencies have now been weaponized against the American people. And we're talking FBI, CIA. Well, CIA was always weaponized against the American people, but now more so than ever, ATF, Department of Injustice as well. And so the American people are just livid, and they're suffering under this incredible yoke of the 3-letter agencies just coming after us, especially patriots, and just wreaking havoc in people's lives. And it's intolerable. It's crazy. It's unbelievable. So I wanted to tell you a quick story, something that just happened in Arizona. And you guys can look this up on YouTube if you have the right combination of words, whatever. We had the ATF doing the most illegal thing I've ever even heard of in my life. They were actually coming to people's doors who had recently purchased. I'm in Arizona. Everyone in Arizona, as you may know, has guns. If you don't exercise your rights, you lose them, okay? So anyway, just this one particular patriot who happened to be smarter than the average bear, he had one ATF come to his door and knock on his door. And then through the door, they said to him, hey, we're here to just do a quick audit of your guns that you recently purchased. You purchased these guns on this date and this date. We see it here. I just need to verify that you have them, that you're not a reseller, that you didn't, get rid of them, resell them to somebody else because you're not a registered reseller or firearm salesperson or whatever. And we had to make sure that you didn't modify them, I guess, is another thing. But anyway, that's what he said through the door. So this particular patriot said to the, and I'm not telling anybody to do this. I'm just giving you a story, okay? He said to the ATF agent, and the first clue that something is really wrong is that the ATF agent was alone, okay? Let me just tell you, you know police procedure as much as I do, Rex, because you've been around the FBI and other agencies. It is against their own policies to ever have an agent go to a door of anybody alone. You always have to do it in pairs, okay? You always have to have two people, only for witness purposes or whatever. But that's the policy of every single agency, all right? So if a guy shows up alone, that right away, that means either he's not who he says he is, or he's not following the policies of his own freaking agency, all right? So this guy knocked on the door, through the security door. He gave that spiel to the person, and this particular patriot said to the guy, "Hey, okay, you know what? Just wait here for a moment. I'll be right back, okay?" And he closed the other door because he still had the security door closed, and so he closed the other door and he went right to his phone. He called 911. He called his local, I think it was local sheriff's department. He was in the sheriff's department jurisdiction. And he called the sheriff's department and he said, hey, he told the truth. He said, "Hey, I've got this guy at my door, and he is claiming to be some sort of federal agent. He did not show a badge, but I did notice he did have a gun on his belt. I saw the gun on his belt. So he is armed, and I am afraid for my life, basically. So I'd like you guys to come here and identify who the freak this guy is, because I'm really scared at this point, and I would like you guys." He's alone. He's alone, which is another red flag. So I'd like you guys to come here and identify him. So sheriff's department came to his front door, all sirens blazing and everything, and they came up to this ATF agent, and they said to him, "Hey, we can see that you're armed. Get down on the ground. Get down on the ground. Spread your arms." And he started, instead of complying, which we all know, you got to comply. You got to comply. Especially when they got the drop on you like that. You can have whatever excuse you want, but you got to comply if you don't want to be shot. So this guy starts fumfering, this particular ATF agent, who we already know is not following the rules of his own agency, starts fumfering and, "Oh, no, I'm a federal agent. You guys are doing real bad." He's like, "No, get down on the ground. We can identify you afterwards. But first, you have to comply. We can identify." No, I can't. The guy says, "I have a bad knee. I can't go down to the ground. I have a bad knee. It'll get injured, and I can't. And I've got my badge right here." No, don't reach for your back. Get down on the ground first. Anyway, it became a major conflagration. I want to say that word. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. It became a big mess. Let's put it that way. And they ended up having to cuff the guy, be rough with him down to the ground. He's like, "Oh, my knee's injured." He's like talking like a senior citizen. And then they twisted his arms behind his back. He's like, "Oh, my shoulder." And then they cuffed him up. They brought him up. And then, as is proper procedure, once they had him neutralized, of course, they made sure he didn't have access to his gun. And they got his badge or whatever credentials, and they identified him properly by examining the badge that it wasn't a freaking phony, which, there's lots of phony badges. And they identified that he was indeed who he says he was. But the conflict had already been created. And the citizens' rights had been protected. That was the important thing. The citizen who was in fear for their life, really, they had their rights protected by their local law enforcement, which is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way it's supposed to be. And so I would always advise people, if you are confronted by federal law enforcement, whether it's the ATF or the FBI or anybody else, these days, you have to verify the badge. Verify the badge and name before you say anything else to them. verify it, get it down, and you can even get on the phone after that, talk to their agencies and verify their badge. And let me tell you, anybody who is an actual federal agent, they all know their badge number by heart. Even if you're just a federal agent for just a few months, you know your badge number. You always know it, if you're really real. So
what was the guy's deal going to that? Sorry to interrupt, John. What was the guy's situation?
Go ahead. I was done.
Why was he going there? Why was he going there by himself? What?
Oh, because he's an idiot. Because he's an idiot. But there's a lot of federal agents that do that because they're idiots, and they don't do things according to protocol. I've seen federal agents out doing interviews like that, and they were smoking cigarettes. Talk about against protocol. I mean, it's crazy how far the quality of these federal agents has gone down over the years. Because when I was in the FBI, you'd never see things like that. You'd never see an FBI agent going to a door by themselves, or smoking a cigarette, or doing other things that are incredibly improper for a federal agent to be doing. But, we're living in a different time.
So, I mean, you're retired from the FBI, and you have a pension from the FBI, right? I mean, so don't you get nervous when you say stuff like that?
No, a pension or a retirement or any benefits from an agency that you used to be with has no longer anything to do with the agency itself. It is actually assigned over to the full faith and credit of the United States of America. And a good way of explaining that, I'll tell you, is this way. This is an easy way. When the Soviet Union was basically destroyed, I mean, it was just blown apart by Ronald Reagan and the Pope at the time and Margaret Thatcher. When it was destroyed, one of the few organizations that they had that had a lot of, I would say, cachet, credentials to it, credit to it, was the KGB, okay? The KGB. So the problem is that the Soviet Union, a lot of their organizations were just dispersed. They were just dispersed, but not the KGB. The KGB was actually reassigned to Russia, to the country of Russia. And then the KGB, the guys who worked for the KGB, never even missed a paycheck. They never missed a paycheck because they went directly from being the KGB to being something called the FSB under Russia. And the organization continued without missing a beat. But even if it had been dispersed, the retirements and the benefits that are paid to the KGB would have been undisturbed, because that cachet, that full faith and credit of the Soviet Union had to be taken over by somebody. And it was taken over by Russia. And Russia just continued all of their most of their operations without missing a beat. That's how it works usually in the real world.
Okay. I've seen a lot, like I said, man, I was talking to you off air. I've watched a lot of spy films, and it seems like in these spy films, there's always different factions within the organization itself, and there's always good and bad. And most movies that are going to do well in the box office are going to have that type of energy and persona, because it's just human nature and psychology, etc. But is it really that way in these agencies? Good and bad, different factions, or are they all, most people just wanting to get a paycheck and follow orders, regardless of the orders?
Yeah, no, it's that way in this sense. The problem is now the entire top layer of leadership of all these three-letter agencies, especially the FBI, has been completely by the cabal, by the dark forces of evil. But you can still be, let's say, the field agents, the rank and file of the FBI, trying to do good, and you could be out there doing everything that you can for the national security of the United States, but you're still dominated by this seventh floor organization that is uniformly That's what we call it, seventh floor at FBI headquarters. This entire leadership of this organization dominates you in every step that you take as a field agent, and they tell you what you can do, what you can't do, and it really affects the entire organization at that point.
What happens if these organizations are disbanded? Do they just are? And how are new ones created? And was it Hoover that started the FBI?
Yes, it was Hoover. And I'll tell you what, and I'll give you an example. This is something I say to the FBI all the time. I try to give them a history lesson on the fact that Hoover didn't invent anything. The federal law enforcement of this country from the year 1860 to the year 1905, or around 1908, was operated and dominated by an organization known as the Pinkerton Detective Agency. The Pinkerton Detective Agency. They were the organization that carried forward. They actually had an office at Department of Justice at the time, was named something else. And they were a private detective agency. They were noticed by Abraham Lincoln during the time of the Civil War, who noticed them because they used to dress in these really sharp suits with these little bowler hats, and big bulges all around their jackets with the latest weapons, the latest technology weapons all around their belt. And it was pretty impressive. They were a very impressive bunch. And they were always dressed immaculately with these suits that were usually plaid, different types of plaid. And it was really wild. Also, the Pinkerton Detective Agency had women and minorities during the Civil War. And they still called themselves Pinkerton men. They still did, because everybody knew, well, that's a Pinkerton man, that's a Pinkerton man. And anyway, so Abraham Lincoln really brought them in to the government, to be a part of the government. And then they grew into the private contractors of federal law enforcement. And that's what they did. The Pinkerton Detective Agency grew to they say it was like 7,000 or 8,000 agents, detectives, at one point in this country. And they carried out all federal law enforcement. Instead of, the U.S. Marshals, they really did it. The Pinkertons were the ones that did it. And there's a lot of stories about the Pinkertons in old Western lore. There's one of their, and then they dominated for federal law enforcement for like 60 years. For 60 years. And then what happened to them, unfortunately, is they got involved in corruption. And the way that it happened was that the great magnates of the trains, the railroads, and building in New York City, the Harrimans, J.P. Morgan, and others started to dominate the Pinkertons and what they needed to do. And so what they finally did was they used the Pinkertons for what was considered the greatest social problem of the 1900s, which was strike breaking and the strikes, the labor movement that all the cities were getting into. And so J.P. Morgan and the Harrimans and the other magnates at that time, they ended up using the Pinkertons illegally for breaking strikes. And so what happened, finally, an incident happened in New York City and in Pennsylvania as well, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, if that was the capital at the time of Pennsylvania, where the Pinkertons got involved in shooting and killing dozens of laborers on strike. And a few Pinkertons were also killed. It was considered the scandal that killed the Pinkerton organization. And then finally in 1905, the Congress passed what was called the anti-Pinkerton legislation that said the Pinkertons are no longer allowed to work federal law enforcement. And so they were blotted out. And their last chance to actually save their organization was the Butch Cassidy and Sundance case that happened right around that time. That was their final chance. They located Butch Cassidy and Sundance in Bolivia, and then, first in Brazil and then in Bolivia. They located them. They went to Bolivia. They made a deal with the district governor that they would take in Butch and Sundance, and then at the last second, the Bolivian governor double-crossed them and sent in the army to kill Sundance and Butch Cassidy, and then that ended the Pinkertons' last chance to revitalize their organization, and that's when they really got screwed, and that's when the Congress passed the act. They got blotted out from federal law enforcement, and then a young clerk in the Department of Justice named J. Edgar Hoover, he looked over the Pinkertons and he was like, I think we could do this in another form. Well-dressed guys who wear the latest weapons, maybe not the hats, but they could wear plain suits, not plaid suits. And I think we could really have something. No women or minorities, but we could have, and call it the FBI, and we could call it the G-Men instead of the Pinkerton Men. And that's what J. Edgar Hoover did. He copied everything from the Pinkertons that he did. Well, almost everything. Not the women and minorities thing. He didn't copy that. But it was pretty astounding. So anyway, my point in telling the FBI this and telling you guys this is that this is a history lesson of an organization that was considered, superlative. They were considered the top of their field. They really were. You can see some of the old movies that show that. And these guys, and they just fell into corruption. They fell into corruption. And then the unthinkable happened. They got dispersed. They got dispersed. The same way that I talk to FBI guys today, and I tell them, hey, you guys are going to get dispersed. You are. Because that's the comeuppance of your situation. And sometimes they laugh at me. And the reason they laugh at me is because they don't know the story of the Pinkertons. And that's why I have to educate them on that. So that's how it goes, man.
Thank you for the lesson. I didn't know any of that. And that's a really cool history lesson. Oh, man, if school was only that fun, I would have stuck around a little bit longer. But man, that was really fascinating. So the G-Men, okay. And I doubt there's many people that have heard about that before. And you really put things into perspective because, it's for somebody that's watching you for the first time, they might be skeptical thinking, okay, we've got a retired FBI agent on the show. But the way that you describe it, and I'm just like, wow, man, that's really powerful. And I think that anybody could understand that. Although I'm sure people in the FBI are going to be like, well, wait a second, man, I'm happy where I'm at, and see, that's the thing is most of these organizations that I've noticed, whether it's government or non-government, you've got a plethora of different types of people. You've got those that are, you've got those that are just, they're keeping their head down, they're following orders. And that's the majority of people. I think most people want the same things and most people care about others. Sometimes people get put in the wrong positions though. And I've had positions in cells before where I was like, I sold timeshare for a while, right? And I know, dude. And when I was selling timeshare, I was working with people that were retired sheriffs, retired agents, retired DOD. They did really well in timeshare, John. They were the best. Like they were the ones that were selling more than anybody because they know how this stuff. They know body language. They know people. And anyway, but it was fascinating. And so now, if you listen to this, and you're a part of one of these agencies, and wouldn't it be cool if there was an agency out there that was pure? Is that even possible anymore? Or that had the intention that has the intentions of justice and liberty for all, freedom, justice, and liberty for all? Or is that just cliche now? Is that cliche?
No, because it's at this point we're at the fourth turning, so it's just not going to happen. It's our society is basically at the final couple of years of the Roman Empire. So that kind of corruption is always going to trickle down, and there's not going to be an agency that's pure. But, I have written extensively to President Trump to advise him that I would like to be a part of the commission that's going to be finding the replacement for the FBI when that time comes. When that time comes. Because it will have to be replaced by something. Just like the Pinkertons were, the Pinkerton Detective Agency also in 1905 was officially had to be replaced by something else that came along in 1908, and that was the FBI. So the FBI is going to have to be replaced also, and it's going to have to be something that takes the best elements of the FBI, fidelity, bravery, integrity, and then transfers them over into some new form. And we don't know what that form is going to look like, but it's going to have a lot more civilian input into it as it goes forward. That's what we need. We need some sort of investigative agency that's going to have a lot more civilian input and input of protection of people's rights, their 4th, 5th, 6th Amendment rights, all of their 14th Amendment rights, all of their rights, so that becomes the greatest focus of federal law enforcement. Is not just to enforce the laws, which can sometimes be corrupt and wrong, but also to enforce the rights of civilians, constitutional rights of civilians. That's the most important thing. That's what we're looking at here. I love the FBI. Well, I love what they used to be, way back. I love what they used to be, but I don't love what they are now. Unfortunately, that's where it goes.
Well, we've got a lot to look forward to, and for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So I'm going to keep the farmer mindset. A farmer has to be an optimist. You know what I mean? Because you better be, there's going to be rain. There's going to be rain. I know it. So let's talk about, and thank you for sharing that, man. That is seriously, I had no idea about any of that. So that makes me feel quite a bit better, actually. That's pretty cool. Should we jump into the 411 stuff, or do you want to talk a little?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry. I cut that off. Yeah.
No, I was so stoked, man. That was great.
Well,
first,
411.
Yeah. Real quick, John, you not only were an FBI agent for 20 years, but you were also somebody that taught FBI agents how to do certain investigations and certain skills. And can you just real quick tell us about that?
I was a legal advisor for the FBI because I'm an attorney and so forth. And so I always taught classes to FBI agents on the importance of people's constitutional rights and how to do investigations while also being cognizant and protective of people's 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment rights, which are the most important when you're having contact with civilians. And so I did that for a long time. Then I also worked with something called the FISA Court, which was this crazy star chamber of federal judges that would just approve warrants, what we call endless warrants on terrorists and foreign agents of a hostile power, that sort of thing. So I was always involved with the legal aspect of people's rights and things of that sort.
I remember a film back in the day, Michael Douglas, called Star Chamber. Did you see that?
Yes, I saw parts of it. Yeah, I remember that. That's what the FISA Court was basically. It was basically a star chamber because the terrorists and the U.S. and the foreign agents didn't have representation in those courts. It was just basically, we have so much evidence that this guy is a terrorist. This guy is a foreign agent for a hostile foreign power, that we're not going to require the other side to be here. We're just going to give warrants to these FBI agents that go on forever on these terrorists, on these agents of a foreign power. And unfortunately, what happened in later years, first of all, that court was supposed to be top secret. And at some point, when I think one of the Bushes were president, the New York Times decided to reveal everything about the FISA court. In the 1990s, they decided to just tell everybody, this is the FISA court, this is what it does. And they basically gave everything. They should have gone to prison for violation of the Espionage Act when they did that. But unfortunately, and Bush said, and I think it was the senior Bush Bush said, he was president at the time, he said, oh, we're going to put them all in jail and this and that. But unfortunately, we found out that the New York Times has more pull with the global powers than President Bush did at the time, because none of them ever suffered one day's wages for having revealed all those secrets about the FISA court. So unfortunately, as the New York Times became involved, other global powers became involved in the FISA court also. And that's when we finally, years later, we saw the FISA court being used for nefarious purposes, like going after American citizens, something that the whole structure of the court was supposed to be never happen. Like, for instance, it was used to go after Donald Trump, who happened to be an American citizen at the time, with all the rights of an American citizen, and yet the court, the FISA court, was used against him and other American citizens as well, which was completely against the entire nature of the FISC of the FISA Act and against the nature of everything that the FISA court represented. So that's just crazy. But that's what happens when globalism creeps in to a system and renders it completely corrupt. That's what happens.
It just reminds me of a playbook like the Communist Manifesto.
Yes.
Like, that's the blueprint, folks. It's an easy read. Read it and you'll be like, oh, it makes so much sense now. Now I get it. Did you know there's only 5 or 6 corporations that control about 90% of the materials that kids get in school, like books, textbooks?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
The school system is completely corrupt. You know, like I said, we're at the fourth turning, folks.
You want to go to the Real Life X-Files with John DeSouza? Subscribe to John DeSouza's YouTube channel. Hit the bell so you'll get all notifications. And also, you want to go to his website, JohnTamaBooks.com. That's JohnTamaBooks.com. And get access to his latest work, his videos, his podcasts. You can see his books right here, The Para-Investigators, Extra Dimensionals, Clear Hearers. Get your autographed copy. I actually have autographed copies from John, which is nice to have. And the information presented is nothing short of exceptional and extraordinary. John has some incredible knowledge that he shares with us in full. We talked for over 2.5 hours on the website, so check us out on the web, leakproject.com. We do live shows free every single day, and in the archives, we have over 4,500 podcasts. So you want to listen to this in full on the website, but we will upload several parts on our YouTube channel as well. So stay tuned and subscribe to our YouTube channel, folks, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. Hit the bell, be well, and be the change you want to see.